British horse racing has long been branded the sport of kings. A brand many are proud of, but one that may alienate a more diverse and inclusive audience. Racing has embarked on a journey over the past 5 years to become more reflective of society in terms of diversity and inclusion. There has been progress, but at times it has been slow and met with discord. However, more recently, we have seen some excellent examples that as a sport, racing should be extremely proud of. Today, we reflect on the sport's inclusive race.
We are here at the beautiful Epsom Racecourse, home of the Derby. And we're here on the back of the news that the first person of colour has become a chairman of this one amazing racecourse. Welcome, Mr. Brian Finch. Congratulations on the new appointment. It's huge for British horse racing, and it's huge for the ethnic minority family in British horse racing.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, nice excitement, loads of good wishes from so many people locally and abroad, and that's fantastic. I'm awfully excited by the opportunity. I've been on the Epsom committee since early last year, working with the current chair, Julia Budd, and a great team of committee members. Great executive, I have to say. So I've got a chance to learn about the business a little bit and the operations. Don't forget, last year wasn't the best year in terms of crowd attendances until everything opened up, thanks to the the release of the regulations. And so I've got a chance to see how important it is to have people on the course and to see people enjoying themselves. It gave us a chance to see if we're offering sufficient, I guess, experiences to racegoers. So it was good learning, and I'm excited about that.
Fantastic. Well, we'll ask you about your plans shortly, but Rish, this is a huge appointment, and it's been a long journey to get here.
Yeah, the whole diversity and inclusion movement in the sport of racing has gained some momentum in the last few years. I think it's important that we take Brian's appointment in the context of the fact that, in terms of merit, he has earned the position. It's not simply a case of this is the right appointment at the right time for any other reason than that primarily, but the appointment carries with it a little bit more weight than just merit. It's also from a role model's perspective that we can see someone with the ethnic background, and Brian's from another country, as you can tell from his accent. It's nice to see a little bit of diversity at the top of British horse racing.
Do you think this would have happened 10 years ago? How have we got here?
I'd like to say in my heart that yes, it would have happened 10 years ago, but my experience over the last decade has suggested that it would have been unlikely without the efforts, work of a lot of people. And I think all those things have contributed to something very tangible, very real, very visual for a lot of people to see Brian in the position that he is in today.
Did you see times were changing in the world that you were coming from, in the business world?
Oh, in the business world, for sure. I mean, Josh, if you're selling any commodity, you want to go to as wide a community as you can, and that embraces everybody. And so the business world had to recognize that they needed people who could connect with the customers that they had outside there, and especially if you were in the sales department, marketing department, HR department, to recruit people. So yes, the business world changed very, very quickly, and continues to change. It's an evolving issue.
The speed of change we've just talked about in racing was a lot slower, perhaps, than the outside world. And have you felt that coming into British horse racing?
Well, if you were taking a snapshot of 5 years ago and then taking one today, I don't think you'd see a great deal of change. But there is work, as you well know, behind the scenes. The question is that work happening fast enough? And is it have we got to the point where we can start to say we are building momentum? And I think that is the challenge for the sport now. How do we start to really build momentum? I mean, I would just pose a challenge to all the constituent parts of racing today to say, look at yourself and ask, are we doing enough, and are we doing enough fast enough?
Can I jump in here, Brian?
Please.
And ask about, because you're obviously going to be having to field some difficult questions over the next few years, and one of the questions I imagine people will ask you will be, why is diversity and inclusion important? Where does the priority fit in? What would you say in your position as chairman of Epsom Racecourse?
It's a good question, that, Rishi. When is the right time? And in my view, the right time to do the right thing is now. And this has been an issue that's been there in racing. I think it's recognized by everybody you'd speak to within the racing community. So if it is the right thing, why aren't we doing it now? Not to compare it against other priorities in the sport, but let's get going. And if you run a business, you know, you don't stop everything because today there's a price war. You do different things, okay? But your engagement with your staff, your celebration of your victories, you do all of these things in the organization because the organization is a complex ecosystem. Racing is exactly that. So today's the right time.
Now the next stage is the speed of that change of now we appreciate there's a problem. What kind of solutions can we look for? Because I think people also worry about doing the wrong thing and they can paralyze themselves somewhat.
Yeah, fear of failure, a human trait, Josh, and sometimes it's a lot easier to do the safe thing. Set up a committee, think about it. But I think we're at that point now where it's really about action. It's about taking a few steps, and if you get it wrong, that's fine, acknowledge it, learn from it, and keep going. I keep saying, if it's the right thing, and I think intuitively we all believe it's the right thing to do, then let's get a move on, step by step. And then you'll build momentum, and it'll become very, very natural. And I think, more importantly, the outer world will look at you, and they will come forward because they'll start to see, well, hey, this could be for me, and I've always been interested, tell me more. And then you start to find that it's quite easy to connect because you're meeting each other more than halfway. And I think that's got to be the next step in my view anyway for racing.
So do you believe there should be targets that we should be aiming at?
Yes, all businesses are very metric driven, but if you're a business, you have a single head, generally speaking, and then you have a team that reports into the single head, and so it cascades. As you well know, racing is a bit more federal, I guess, in the way it operates. So if we set targets, they have to be cognizant of the way that racing is constructed and put together. I would, though, say that, like everything, I often talked in my past life about organizational bravery. There's times when you know you're going into unknown space, and that needs a leader that's going to be brave enough to want to go forward with that, a leader that's going to inspire the organization to come along with them, and as a consequence of that action, once they get going, if it's the right thing that they're doing, and they're gaining an advantage, you start to find the rest of the industry starts to make their steps. And perhaps that's the one thing that some of the leaders in racing today need to give consideration to. It doesn't always have to be everybody at the same time. Some need to take the first step and get going.
Rish, back in autumn 2020, you and I met up to discuss probably our frustration at what had gone on. George Floyd's murder had been earlier that year. The Black Lives Matter movement had started in earnest, and the frustration I think we both were feeling at the time about the sport that we love that hadn't done a lot.
And as a consequence of saying some genuine sentiment and expressing that genuine sentiment, it resulted in quite a lot of negativity towards what we'd said. And the response was brutal. If I'm entirely honest, some of the things that came my way, individuals contacted me personally to express their disgust with the things I'd said. At no point did I ever try to threaten the sport or to threaten anyone within the sport. I felt that I was making genuine suggestions for things to be a little bit better. So I reassessed it, and in my own moments of reflection on what we talked about, I realised that perhaps I was threatening what had become the norm. And in the end, it was an experience that I felt I would take the positives away from ultimately. I did the hurt, and I took the hurt, and I felt bruised and battered, but you know, I grew for it, and you know, I felt stronger at the end of it because a lot of people came out in support as well.
Most great leaders, Rish, never ask for it. There's some that are fanatic and they, you know, this is it, I'm going to take things. Most great leaders get there by default because they start to challenge things. I mean, look, the job you're doing, for example, it's not something you want to do. You want to go out and ride horses and have fun. But all of a sudden you realize, but this is important.
I can't leave the sport in the way it is, that's the thing.
And as a consequence, you've now been elevated into this position where people are waiting to hear your voice, good or bad. And sometimes people are very excited with you, and there's other times, boy, they're going to be throwing you pelters.
Yeah.
And actually, you're sitting back sometimes thinking, I don't know why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
until you go to bed. And then you get up and you come back and say, well, it's just come upon me.
Oh,
And
until
so
you see
called
someone
the burden
that
of
walks
leadership.
in
Yeah.
and goes,
Yeah.
you've completely changed my life. And then you'll just I'll keep taking
Correct.
pelts all day.
And you start to look at those are the motivational things that kind of keep you going.
Yeah.
But it's not something you'll have asked for. And then, you'll get to
we also
65,
have
70 and want to write a book. Some people will be asking you, why did you do this? And you go, I never intended it. It just came.
How did you feel when you saw the interview, Brian?
Yeah, I realized there's a journey. I thought you were brave enough to talk about it. It was topical worldwide, so topical here. Yeah, I thought it was great that you actually had the conversation and you were talking freely. And it's like everything. If you're going to disagree with anything, I often do this with my hands when I'm talking. I said, we see this, you see this, and somehow we got to get us doing that. And the minute we start to see each other in an equal way, then you start to think about, so how can we go forward? How can we bond? How can we connect? Whatever the case may be. And in this instance, I think what you had was this and possibly that far down.
People will probably be sitting at home going, why are you going over this old ground? Those critical people. But please understand, just like all of us sitting here now, the three of us, we love racing. So if you're going to criticize me, which is fine, but understand that I'm not trying to do anything other than help. One of the positives that came out of what we did was in the week after, there was a industry gathering, and every organisation in racing said that they were going to sign a paper to support diversity and inclusion. The next step, which is what do we do next to make the change? And I believe that quite a lot of organisations don't know what the next step is. There are studies that have been done, that exist, that haven't seen the light of day, where people from ethnic communities have been asked questions by research groups as to why they aren't interested in coming racing, what their perception of racing is, and those studies are there, they're out there, and there are reasons that they're saying why they won't come racing. Those studies should be made available to every racecourse in this country so that they understand the perception from other people, because that goes back to the origination of what we've been talking about, what I was saying earlier, that seeing other people's point of view, stepping in the shoes of somebody else, will allow you to see their vision, their challenges, and their understanding, and most importantly, their feelings, how they feel about stuff. Because without feelings, it's a very cold world we live in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is what encourages people to make activities. So if we could understand the view of why some ethnic communities won't come racing or feel intimidated by coming racing, then maybe the racecourses can cater for that, because therefore there's a whole bunch of customers out there. That's the business aspect of why diversity and inclusion is important.
Just to build on that, Rishi, if that sort of insight is available to the industry, and sometimes when you ask questions, you find out things that surprise you, shock you in a way. So there's almost an embarrassment maybe. How did we miss this? Were we really looking in the right places? And the people that are receiving that knowledge have to go through a process of digesting it. So I'm okay with that, because it's human nature. The question that arises from there is, does that then mean that you pretend it's not there? Or does that actually mean that you go, wow, there's an opportunity here?
How do we in British horse racing start to get the leadership to care about what it's like in 10 years' time?
Josh, blessed are those that plant a tree knowing that they'll never sit under it.
Amen.
And that really is the crux of the matter. And perhaps your question really boils down to, when does racing have conversation, the component parts of racing have a conversation about the sport, its health, its well-being, and where it could be in a 5, 10, 15, 20-year horizon, which, by the way, all other sports are doing, and that's why you see all the innovations that the other sports are bringing in, be that football, which is my other passion outside of racing, be that Formula One, for example. In the case of Formula One, it took a private equity firm to come and look at Formula One and say, we can see how this could be very, very different. And we could see where the new audience is. And that new audience happens to be the US. And well, look at the value now of F1 relative to what the private equity bought the business for. So that is a big question for racing, that at some point it has to have the discussion. Part of racing's challenge, for me anyway, is it looks for consensus all the time. And therein lies the problem. If your business models are completely different, if we all see the world in a different place, it's going to take a core group or a core institution to plot away and say, these are the facts, this is what we believe is right, come on board, and if not, we're going to get going. And one, I assure you, will become two, will become three, and so it grows. But that needs to happen.
The great parts of your experience, Brian, is from Zimbabwe and the racing industry over there. You've been an owner over there, but there's a community there around the world that we're not embracing yet that actually reside in Britain. You got thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we often hear the comment, it's the ethnic minorities and maybe they're not engaged in racing, they don't understand the sport, etc., etc. And I wonder sometimes, I think, well, hang on a minute, Zimbabwe? I raced in Kenya, which is where I lived for a while, and you only have to go to these places and see the passion that's there for the sport. Mauritius, if you ever get a chance to go racing in Mauritius, tight little track, and people absolutely jumping and thriving on that. And I think again here, the South Asian community, lots of stories about how jockeys would go in the winter to go ride in India. I don't know what the hell well-being of the Indian racing community is. Where are they in our sport, in our hierarchy? Why are they not on our race courses in the numbers that they should be, given how many people live here? How about Chinese, Hong Kong, Japanese, big racing communities? Where are the Latinos? They're all around and they live here, especially London. London's such a melting pot of all communities. And we very rarely see those communities in great numbers regularly visiting. Again, please, it's not a judgment, it's not a criticism, it's an observation. And in that observation is the fact that there's opportunity. How do we connect? How do we invite them? How do we make those communities feel that they can come here and enjoy a sport which is so well known in their home countries, that they could come here and enjoy it and really love it? And if anything, that's what we will try and do here at Epsom Downs, is just connect a lot better than maybe we have done in the past with all the communities around us.
So Rish, 25 years time, we're sat here.
The ghost of Rishi will be sat here.
The ghost of Rish. There won't be a lot of black hair, it'll be grey hair.
All right, steady. Well, at least there will be some hair.
Oh, touche.
What do we look like as a sport?
Well, let me tell you what the way I would like to see things go in the next 25 years. When we did our first interview on Leading the Way, one person contacted me and said, you should be emboldened by two aspects of diversity and inclusion that should reassure you that you're doing the right thing. And the two things were, there's the moral case for doing the right thing, there's a moral case for diversity and inclusion, because as human beings, we ought to be welcoming to all and sundry, regardless of any previous or other people's perceptions of discrimination. We shouldn't be like that, and we should be welcoming to everybody. The second one is the business aspect of looking to diversity and inclusion. Every day we pick up the newspaper, or every day we look online, there are concerns, criticisms, challenges for the sport of horse racing. And we're just dealing with the sport of horse racing, and I know that there's a wider world out there of life. But in racing, there are huge challenges that the sport faces with regards to prize money, to attendance, to field sizes, to welfare. And it's important that one of the things that we do is look to expand our customer base. So here's an option of one of the ways to potentially improve the income to the sport by accessing a slightly wider base of customers. So in my view, the journey that I'd like to see us go on in the next 25 years satisfies both those needs. Satisfies the need for us to be more welcoming to everyone and to understand other people's perceptions, and that other people might be slightly intimidated. They might feel that a race course is not a place for them. Just to try, and because those steps will lead to other things, and then that in itself would be a knock-on to the business aspect of it, and that suddenly you might get a few more people coming through the turnstiles to the race course saying, well, yes, now. And so in 25 years' time, you turn up here on Derby Day and you look on this lawn behind us and it's representative of society. And that's where I'd like us to end up in 25 years' time. And I'm hoping that there are going to be more people willing to take up the challenge. And I fully accept that it is a challenge. It's work, it's commitment, and it's support. All those things are involved in making that journey. I'm probably not going to be part of the entire journey, but the little bit that I can contribute to, I most certainly will.
And Brian, focusing on your probably slightly shorter period of time, let's say over the next decade, because there's going to be a period of that decade where you are going to be chairman of an inner city London track. How do you see your role here in terms of helping the sport to become far more diverse than it currently is?
So let me try and answer it this way. Is what do I not want the sport to be? And I do not want it to be a niche sport, because if it was, I probably wouldn't have found it in my past life. I do not want it to be a sport that is kind of lost from public consciousness. And I certainly don't want it to be a sport that the vast majority just ignore totally. Because I know how much pleasure, pride, passion, love, and all these wonderful experiences that I've had. And I really don't want others to be deprived of that. So how do we ensure that doesn't happen? And you asked the question about what we'll do here at Epsom Downs, is to start to really ask the difficult questions with the executive. The idea is to make sure that the executive are thinking about these things, that they not just thinking about these things, but putting plans in place. And because I'm interested, because I have a marketing background, because I'm interested in businesses growing. If the business grows, it means we're reaching more people, means the business that we're operating is healthier, and as a consequence, the sport has got to be healthier. So those are the kind of things that I think I'll be certainly having discussions with the executive at the right time, and with my committee as well. And no doubt in all of the engagements with the other race courses that are part of the wonderful Jockey Club group, we'll be sharing experiences. And if there's things that the other race courses are doing that we could apply here really quickly, trust me, we will. And if there's things that we pilot and test in the way we engage with local communities that seem to work, then we'll be sharing these across the group as quickly as we can. You know, Josh, I'm really excited about what's coming because, again, I believe in looking forward rather than looking back, but you need to look back to get the insight. And I think there's recognition, willingness, desire among the teams that I've met already so far to want to do the right thing.
What's your vision?
My vision for the next decade, 25 years, is how we engage the next generation coming through, because that's how we're going to become reflective of society. And that isn't necessarily coming horse racing. It could be some form of digital way of how do you consume our sport? How does the next gen consume any of their pastimes now? And it's generally through a device. And then the second or third stage is that you come and actually see it in the flesh. So we've got to get people engaging in our sport. We've got to have the platforms there to do it. And we need to start to listen to the next generation. Because there's no point asking them the question unless you listen. So I sincerely really hope and believe that even in 5 to 10 years, we have got an industry sport leading digital application that engages the next generation in our sport. It's not all about betting. But it is about competition. It's about the names. It's about the faces. It's about the colour. It is a fantastic sport, but it's going to be consumed in a very different way to perhaps it was in the 1900s, which is all you could do is come racing to experience it. Now we have a whole number of ways and channels for our sport to be consumed, and I think that really needs embracing.